need to start by asking a question of everybody, which is, do you know where your name comes from? And, you know, is anybody willing to share the story behind their name? Let's see, how do I need to get everybody lined.
I'll share
just
my
jump
story
in there.
because I have like the typical Jewish girl story of I was named after my great-grandmother. Faye is my middle name, and my first name is Jennifer for my uncle Judd that passed away before I was born. But I was given sort of an arbitrary Hebrew name, as is customary in secular Jewish Reform life. And after I had my daughter, I changed it myself and had my own naming ceremony with her. So now my Hebrew name is Tzipporah.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And that creates a connection between you and me. You don't know this. My mother's name, Allah Shalom, her Hebrew name was Tzipporah. So when I hear that your name is Tzipporah, I feel a connection to you, and it's just because of the name. Anybody else know the story behind their name? It doesn't necessarily have to be that you were named for somebody. Don't be shy.
This is Fallon talking. My
name
is from Dynasty.
Okay, and who was the Dynasty fan?
So my mother was a Dynasty fan, so much so that as a fundraiser myself, sometimes when I'm working with doctors, they can guess my birth year based on my name and the height of the popularity of this soap opera that was very popular in the late 70s, early 80s.
Okay, thank you. So we come by our names in different ways, and our relationship with our name evolves over time. What's probably fair to say is that we each think of our names as pretty significant. That is, you get to be a certain age, it's hard to imagine living with a different name. And there are people who believe that, you know, the kind of person you are is very much tied up with the name that you're given. And that's why parents, people who are about to become parents, you know, go into this tizzy because they feel they have to find the perfect name for their child. Otherwise, their child will lead a miserable life. So let's take a look. The reason I asked you about your names, and I hope that everybody was thinking about the story of their names, even if they didn't volunteer it, was because this week we begin reading from the second book of the Torah, and the name of both the weekly portion or parasha and the book itself is Shmot, which is the Hebrew word for names. So if we can have the next slide. Who controls this? Who controls the power? There we go. So let's. It's my custom before we engage in before I engage in text study to say the bracha for learning. I invite everybody wherever you're sitting to join me. Nobody is obligated to do this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, ruler of the universe, who set us apart with the mitzvot and commanded us to engage with words of Torah. So let's look now to the next slide. This is the first sentence of this parasha, of this portion. Does somebody want to read it? All right, I'll read it. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each coming with his household. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Judah, Yisachar, Zvulun, Benjamin, Dan, and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. These are the 12 tribes. Now, it's interesting that the very first sentence of the parasha lists the names. And the reason that's interesting to some people is that the very last thing we read about in the book of Genesis before it closes is we read these names. These are the sons of Jacob. And now we read them right again. It's all about reminding us of the power of names. So we read about these 12 people. Let's go to the next slide. And as we get deeper into the story, we learn the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah. Again, names. Everybody gets a name. And now something very interesting happens as we make our way deeper into the story of the Israelites becoming slaves in Egypt. Let's go to the next slide. A certain man of the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. What's missing here?
The names.
Yeah, up until now, we've heard everybody's name. And all of a sudden, there's no name here. We have an anonymous, this is completely anonymous. And of course, this is a literary device that's not unique to the Torah. We see it in all sorts of ancient as well as contemporary literature, because if you go to the next slide, we go a little deeper into the story. Who do we discover that anonymous person is? When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who made him her son. She named him Moses, explaining, I drew him out of the water. Moses, one of the great figures in the Torah, initially comes out of a completely anonymous background. His parents aren't named, and he doesn't get a name until this portion of the story. And it's very striking, given that the story starts with very specific names, that the central character comes out of a very anonymous beginning. The question is, why does the Torah do that? One classic commentary is to remind us that you can never predict where a leader is going to come from. Moses rises out of anonymity. There's nothing in his birth story that would tell you he's going to become the great figure in the Bible. And that's a literary technique that you see in ancient Greek epics. You see it in contemporary literature. So that's something to think about in terms of this week's Torah portion. What I want to do now is shift gears a little bit and talk with you about this business of Divrei Torah, sharing words of Torah, and how you learn how to do that, and why that is important for you, someone who aspires to leadership in the JCC world. And I'm going to start by asking you, just raise your hand so I can see. How many of you have heard Divrei Torah before? That's the plural. It's not Dvar Torahs, it's Divrei Torah. Okay, raise your hand if you've heard somebody explain something about the weekly Torah portion. So I see a lot of hands. How many of you have actually been the person to give a Dvar Torah? That's the singular. Okay, I see fewer hands. Now we come to the kicker question. How many of you feel really comfortable with the idea of leading a discussion about the Torah? Okay, I see a couple of hands, but not too many. So I appreciate that. Here's the truth. Anybody who tells you that giving a Dvar Torah is easy and not to worry about it is lying. There are a lot of good reasons why it should make you nervous to think about giving a Dvar Torah. What I want to do in the 5 or so minutes that I have left, though, is walk you through a process of thinking about Divrei Torah that I hope will open your minds to the possibility. Okay? So I see a big difference between easy and comfortable. That's true. Thanks, Clara, for sending me that note. Some people are comfortable with it even if they know that it's hard. Some people, it might come easy to and are uncomfortable with it. You're right, they're two very different things. But the truth is, we know a lot of people break into a cold sweat at the idea of having to do this. So let's see what we can understand about what a Dvar Torah really is in terms that I hope will make everybody feel a little more comfortable and make it a little easier. So let's go to the next slide. I want you to imagine that you've just taken a trip You're in your hotel room. You've got your suitcase. I want you to close your eyes. Just a little guided imagery here. I want you to imagine that the suitcase is there on your bed. You've opened it up. Take everything out of that suitcase so it's empty. Okay? Your luggage is empty. Now I want you to open your eyes. And I want you to quickly jot down. You can open your eyes now. Make a list in your head or jot it down. What are all the things that make you nervous about when you think about giving a Dvar Torah or being asked to give a Dvar Torah? And you're the only one that's going to see this list, so don't worry about it. Just jot down all the things that make you nervous about it. Don't process this too much. Okay? Now I want you to imagine, close your eyes again. I want you to take that list, put it back into your empty suitcase, zip up that suitcase or buckle it if you have an old-fashioned suitcase, snap the things shut. And now I want you to imagine that you're at the airport with that piece of luggage and you're weighing it. How heavy is that list of things on a scale of 0 to 50 pounds? Is it just a couple of things and it weighs 10 pounds, or there are a lot of things on your list and it weighs 20 pounds? That's your Dvar Torah baggage. We all have Dvar Torah baggage, the stuff that makes it hard for us to think about doing that. What I hope is that throughout the process of JLTI in this little conversation, you begin to lighten the load a little bit, okay? So let's go now to the next. So the first thing we need to acknowledge is everybody has baggage when it comes to giving a Dvar Torah, and that's okay, because that's just the way it is. Own it. And if you know what your baggage is, now you know what you need to overcome in order to be more comfortable. Let's go to the next slide. I want you to ask, who in your family is the family storyteller? Who is the keeper of the family stories? Who is it that you turn to when you want to hear about what Grandpa did, or what Zadie did, or what great aunt whatever did? Because this person knows all the stories. Raise your hand if there's somebody in your family that's understood by everybody as the keeper of the family stories. All right? I don't see too many hands. That's interesting. So this is a picture. This is actually my great aunt Sophie, Allah Shalom. She died a long time ago. Great aunt Sophie, she was the keeper of the stories. I grew up hearing all the stories from Sophie. Occasionally, when we were together and she wasn't there, we would tell the stories. But they were never as good as when Sophie told them. What I want you to think about is the stories in the Torah are the Jewish people's family stories. And just like you grew up hearing about the stories of your family from that one person, you learn about the stories of the Jewish people from different people. The question is, how do you become someone who shares those stories? What happens when, my great aunt Sophie, she's not here anymore. So here's the great secret. If one of the ways of demystifying the weekly Torah portion is to stop thinking of them in terms of, wow, sacred, sacred, sacred language. Now, these are the family stories about all of our crazy ancestors. Great uncle this, and, great great grandma, remember the time she went and got lost and whatever. It helps us think about giving a Dvar Torah as doing something that's as old as humanity. Let's go to the next slide, please. The way every culture develops its story is by sharing them, by talking, through conversation. Giving the Dvar Torah is nothing more than talking about the stories of your people. Let's go to the next slide, please. And in fact, telling stories is what makes us human. I highly recommend this book to everybody. It's a real book. And it talks about what happens when human beings tell stories. What makes telling a Dvar Torah, giving a Dvar Torah, slightly different than any other kind of conversation is that it just has a different set of rules than how I'm talking with you now. But once you understand the rules, it becomes much simpler. So let's go to the next slide. I want to give you 5 questions and 1 point. And this I'm going to wrap up. I'll go a minute over. When you are thinking about a Dvar Torah, these are the 5 questions that you want to ask. First of all, who am I speaking to? When I prepared my remarks about the issue of the names that open the book of Exodus, I knew I was speaking with you guys. That meant I chose something different and spoke about it a little differently than I might have if I were speaking to a group of PhDs in Bible study. If I were invited by Mark to give a Dvar Torah to the faculty of the rabbinical school, the Jewish Theological Seminary, and I had a bunch of brilliant rabbis, I would be really nervous because I would need to think about it differently. So who's your audience so that you can pick something that works? The second question, what's your text? The first portion in the book of Exodus has lots and lots of sentences. I didn't choose to speak about all of it. I chose one idea and I chose a few sentences to illustrate it. You're always better off focusing a little more narrowly than a little more broadly. But what's the text that you're going to use? Third question. What are the questions that you have about the text? Because the likelihood is if you have a question about it, somebody else will too. What's hard about it? What's confusing about it? What's interesting about it? What makes it stand out? Does it contradict what came before? Is there a reason, when you wonder, what is this doing here? That's a really important question because it also presumes that you've actually read the text. So once you know who your audience is, obviously the first thing read what you're supposed to talk about, and then you pick your text. The fourth question is, what help do you need with the text? You should never assume that you should be able to do this without getting help. Now that help might be someone that you ask personally, or it might be help you get from some book that's written about the Torah. I rely upon lots of classic commentators. So I get help from the 11th century, from Rashi. I get help from the year 1000, from Maimonides. I almost never come up with this stuff by myself. So what help do you need and where do you get it? And finally, what's the point you want to make? I've heard a lot of really good Divrei Torah ruined because the person tried to make 5 points. They should have stopped after the first one. With Divrei Torah, generally less is more. Let me finish with my last comment as an introduction. Do you remember what I started my Dvar Torah with? We talked about the power of names in the book of Exodus, but that's not what I started with. What did I start with? What was my opening question? I asked you about your names. Because, as the great author E.M. Forster said, only connect. What's going to make your Dvar Torah meaningful to people is if you can figure out what's the issue in their life that connects them to the thing that you want to talk about. I'm willing to bet that when I put that first slide on the screen that listed the names of the tribes of Israel, you were already primed a little bit because I had asked you about your names. Always ask, how does what I'm talking about connect to the people I'm talking to? So I'm going to stop here. I've run a few minutes over. This is my attempt to demystify and perhaps take a little of the fear factor out of the concept of Divrei Torah, because it's one of the things we're going to be asking each of you to try on as sort of a stretch assignment. To engage with the stories of our people and to become a storyteller. It's a lot of fun. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, David. I just want to reiterate, David, please do me a favor and let me know if anyone does not already receive David's Divrei Torah on the Thursday. Generally, they come out on Thursday. I tried to make sure that everybody was still on that list so that everybody receives that. Let me know by Zoom text if you don't already get it. I have actually used them if asked at my synagogue on one foot, the rabbi's out, can you deliver the Divrei Torah? And I said, sure. And I used David's. So, no, just kidding. I connect David's and I use his. He's my Rashi, if you will. So yes, and what David said is true. We will be asking each and every one of you to deliver a Divrei Torah at some time during this 16 months. And so now that you have some guidelines, we will have a sign up following this webinar about who would like to take that first plunge for the Divrei Torahs that the Divrei Torah we're going to engage with during our retreat, only in 1 month. And, we just simply feel like advancing leaders in Jewish life should have that capacity. So thank you and good luck. So now we're going to continue on to the bulk of our study previous to this. I'm hoping everyone was able to watch the TED Talk by Adam Grant, excuse me, and we're going to break out and talk a little bit about your reactions. Actually, we're not going to talk at all. The JLTI faculty is going to just be in your breakout rooms to listen. We're going to completely be on mute because we want to see how the questions evolve. Adam Grant, in the next slide, he really talked about original thinking. And one of the things that he came up with, and I thought was hysterical, was procrastination as a concept of creativity, which I never put together before. And I want you to understand that the goals of this conversation, before we get to the actual conversation, it's going to be 10 minutes, if you will. And we could do the next slide. The goal of the conversation is to go in your breakout rooms, to briefly introduce yourselves. Make sure you share your reaction to the TED Talk and to our questions, which will be following this slide, but not yet. As I say, we're going to be observers and just take in everything that we are all doing. And then when we come back to the webinar, we'll have more to talk about. But as I say, the goals of this conversation is to maximize yourself. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. And another thing I'd like you to try is to practice speaking positively. There is a significant difference between speaking positively and speaking negatively, especially when we speak about ourselves. And I want to work on in advancing your speech and your confidence in speaking positively about yourself. So I'm going to ask that, now we can do the next slide, I believe. Before you break out, I'd like you to Zoom text me your number of that scale of 1 to 10 of procrastination that you prepared for today, as well as your greatest skill. And I'm going to use these numbers and these words as part of our program at the retreat. So if you could kindly privately Zoom text me now, I'm looking forward to my 21 answers. And then as I do that, Ellen is going to break you out in rooms and you can continue your conversation. And we'll be back at, let's say, 2:43.
You want me to do the breakout rooms now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So as Beth said, you want to unmute yourself. And yeah, Claire, I don't know who can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I would unmute yourself, and then we can answer the questions.
Yeah, she asked us to text her, but to chat her the information. But once you go into the breakout groups, you can't access the full list.
Yeah, we're learning the tech as we go.
So Ellen, should we leave the room, text her, and then come back in?
I don't think we can come back in unless somebody else puts us in the breakout group.
Yeah, I'm the one that did that, but I also don't want to mess up other people's rooms. I'd say let's just wait until we're back all together, and then you can text her.
Cool.
So, do you guys remember what the questions are?
Yeah, we were.
How are you original?
How are you original, and what's your procrastination scale? Right, and your procrastination scale.
Yeah, so feel free to talk about those things. How are you original? All that stuff. I'm supposed to be just observing, so.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Clara. I don't think I met you guys in the other breakout group before.
No, they're different this time.
Yeah. So I'm in between Ohio and Michigan at the moment, and I guess my procrastination number is somewhere between 5 and 6, give or take. And how am I original? I am the sum of a unique set of experiences and skills and education and personality traits and character traits that all sort of converge to create an original person with an original perspective that only I have. That's it. Anybody else?
All right, I can go next. Oh, was that everything? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's hard not seeing you.
Oh, wait, you can't see me? That's so funny. I can see me.
Yeah, I can see you too.
I mean,
I can see you.
Oh.
It might be the way you have the box set up. There's different ways to see the chat boxes, so it might be something where you can only see the person speaking or something like that.
Oh, well,
me?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, Renee, why don't you go next?
Okay. I'm Renee. I would say my procrastination level really depends on how interested I am in what I'm doing. If it's something that I'm excited to do, I would say it's probably a 4 to 5. I know, still not perfect. And then if it's something I don't really want to do, but it's something I have to do, I'd say it's probably closer to an 8. One trait that, wasn't that one of the questions? One trait that you want to amplify about yourself?
Yeah.
Ellen, was that one of the questions?
Yes.
So one trait that I would amplify about myself would be my drive and determination. I feel that I really am somebody who pushes things through, yet there are times where things can get you down and it's hard to continue to be someone who motivates everyone around you. So it's a little bit of that self-motivation to continue to push that drive would probably be one of those traits that I would amplify about myself. And what makes me original? I think it's something that makes all of us original. It's like all the different pieces put together, a little bit of my informal education in this field, my love of camp, my creativeness. I would say being creative definitely makes you a level, I don't know, a level of originality. So that's me.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I would say I think in my gut who I am, I'm not a procrastinator. I'm probably somewhere around a 2. Procrastination gives me such anxiety. I absolutely hate it. But in reality, I think in my professional life, I probably am somewhere around a 7 or 8 because of just amount of work on our plate and bandwidth. I feel like I am just I absolutely hate it. But one thing that I've grown to be comfortable with is I pull it off and I'm good, especially if I'm like thrown into a meeting or a meeting with a donor or somebody. Sort of that pressure and anxiety sometimes serves me good, and I'm able to like sometimes have my best meetings under those conditions, which absolutely I hate, but it happens sometimes, often, not sometimes, often. So I would say that is the piece that is, I mean, the positive is I feel confident and good around it, but the lead up to it is hard because it's just not who I am. Even as a kid and student, I'm just not like, such relief would come once it was off the list and early. So I used to take pride in that, but it's not really realistic anymore.
Oh.
Okay. Is there anybody else in this room? I know, Claire, you're sort of in here twice because you have like your face and then your phone.
And I can't seem to get that off, like, because I had to dial in on my phone, but then I also have it in the app. It's weird.
I see a 408 number.
That's not me.
Okay. The person with 408. Nope. Oh.
408 left the meeting.
Uh-oh. Okay. Well, I don't know who that person is. Oh well. Okay.
So are we supposed to talk about the nature of like procrastination as a vehicle for creativity and imagination, or?
Sure. Yes.
I guess I wasn't entirely clear about how she wanted us to respond to the TED Talk.
Well, why don't you respond with what you thought? And
well, as a practiced procrastinator, I think I've changed my perspective on defining procrastination. I think when I was younger, I looked at it as putting stuff off that I didn't want to do, or putting things off in favor of doing something that I might prefer to do. But professionally, what I've found, and quite frankly, as a sort of a creative person, and somebody who is drawn to the arts and creative profession and work that involves imagination, I actually found that I resonated with that idea that actually procrastination is, I'm not putting something off that I don't want to do. I'm often putting off the action at the end so that it comes at the end of a lot of thought and internal brainstorming. So I'm finding that when I really thought about it and when I really sort of evaluated what I was doing, I found that what I'm really doing is a lot of information gathering and then processing, and then looking at an idea and sort of seeing how it fits, and then letting it sit and process, and then going back to it. So I'm finding that it's actually a multi-stage process where I don't want to jump in necessarily and do the work immediately, because I really do need to let my brain cogitate on what's happening and what I need to do and what I want the end result to be and how I'm going to get there. There's actually a lot of sort of creative thought before I get to the action. And then when I get to the action, I feel like I'm there and I get it done, and it's done. And all of a sudden I become very tachlis oriented, so very bottom line. But there's this period of time in between knowing I need to do something and getting to that point where I feel like I can just do it. So sort of a creative process.
Yeah.
Sorry, that sounded very fluffy and artistic, but.
No, it's all
makes
good.
sense.
Anyone else? Otherwise, we can pop back into the webinar. Good. Okay. All right. So I'm going to close our breakout room, leave it, I guess, and everybody does the same, and we'll go back into the webinar. We're learning. It looks like we're the first back. Oh, there's Mark. Oops.
Ellen, are we the last group back?
No.
Okay.
I think you're.
I was making sure at 10 minutes we were going to get back.
Yeah, I did the same. Yeah.
Cool.
No, it looks like most people are not back yet.
So is everybody back? Almost everybody's back, right, Ellen?
Yeah, almost everybody's back. And if you weren't able to chat to Beth your 1 to 10, now you can do that now that she's back in. We, like I said to my group, we're learning about
Right,
the
that's
Zoom
interesting. You can only chat, right? Okay, great.
So yeah, and if you haven't already done that, I would say while we're waiting, do that now.
Thank you, Ellen.
Yeah, we're waiting for, looks like maybe 3 more people to come back.
Thank you, Aaron. I got yours. Thank you, Anna. I've got yours. Renee, I've got yours.
Well, it looks like all the rooms might be back and maybe some people got disconnected. Because it looks like pretty much everybody's back and definitely all the rooms are closed. So I don't know, Beth, if you want to.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'll just continue and then I'll go back to my chat room after. That's perfectly fine. So thank you all for playing along. I hope that was fun. It was hard for me not to speak, which, you know, is an area of things that I'd like to amplify or not amplify. But I want to say that I hope it connects you more a little bit to each other and potentially connects you to the beginning of your journey, and to really have faith that you're on the right track. You were recommended and commended and selected to be in this program for a reason. And, you know, Adam Grant also touched on Martin Luther King. And I wanted to kind of bring that concept up, the concept of Dr. Martin Luther King there. He is with a special man named Abraham Joshua Heschel in 1965 in Selma. Abraham Joshua Heschel with the white hair, the white beard, and the glasses. More on him another time, perhaps. But I wanted to kind of make sure that we understood what we talked about, maximize and amplifying, because we don't want to work on something. I'd love to work on things that you're not good at, but I also do want to spend a lot of time during this program to amplify and maximize your experience and your great skills. So to just wrap up that, I want to say that, I sent out that email about successfully speaking. I'd love to see a group of hands to see who started looking at her videos, if it made any kind of impact. Just would love to know about how it worked, and know it had a tremendous impact on me. We're beginning to go down through a self-awareness path also that could be, again, comfortable being uncomfortable with really seeing yourself as this advanced leader. The positive speaking, I hope that went well. In the group that I observed, we talked about, the things that happen at the JCCs with all of us completely understanding and without saying anything really negative. So we also learned at this time about how to do a Devar Torah, which I don't know if any of you really enjoyed that or not. I mean, I'm sure you did enjoy it to an extent, but frankly, no one has ever taught me how to do a Devar Torah, and I have an advanced degree from the Jewish Theological Seminary. So the good news is that now I have a new lens of which to do a Devar Torah myself. So I'm excited about that. You will be able to sign up for a Devar Torah soon. The other piece of it, and I hope that the conversation that Adam, the TED Talk and the conversation that you had with each other give yourself permission to be imaginative. We invite you to be as imaginative as possible in this process and in your work. And we want to make sure that what we give you does that for you. So thank you for that. I'm going to go on to the next slide. Actually, David's going to go on the next slide. He's going to talk a little bit about connecting imagination and our concept today to the Jewish lens.
Okay, and I'm resetting my kitchen timer. I'll see if I do a better job of hitting my time marks. So we've already said the blessing. You only have to say that one once a day. We tend to think of imagination as something that's, part of the modern world, and if it's old and ancient, they weren't very imaginative. I want to take a few minutes and walk with you through some texts from the history of Jewish thought to see how have Jews thought about this idea of imagination. So this is from the Babylonian Talmud, which means we're looking at a text from about the year 500 CE. So it's about 1,500 years old, which means the oral tradition is even older than that. This is just when it gets written down and codified. Alexander the Great asked the Jewish rabbis of the South, who is a wise man? And this is what they said: the person who sees what is born, when you can see the outcome. This notion, which in Hebrew, haroeh et hanolad, is essentially a statement that a wise person is one who can imagine the consequences of an action. It's not someone who's stuck only with what they see in front of them, but they can think about what might yet be, or what has not yet come to pass. This is something that I think is relevant for today, not just for the ancient rabbis. I was reading in the New York Times, the ongoing successful New York Times. You may have been following the senior figure in the Mormon church died. They called him the prophet. This is what they said about him in the paper. Prophets see ahead. They see the harrowing dangers the adversary has placed or will yet place in our path. Prophets also foresee the grand possibilities and privileges awaiting those who listen with the intent to obey. Imagination, seeing things that have not yet happened yet, even if you only see them in your head. That's what we call the vision thing. So that's one text. Let's go to the next text. Can we go to the next slide, please? Here's another statement, and I want you to think about your own experiences. No, go back one. We flipped ahead too much. Okay, I want you to think about your experiences in schools and what your teachers told you when you had an answer that was different. It happens, these rabbis, Yochanan ben Bruka, Rabbi Elazar ben Chisma, they went to visit this one rabbi in Pekain. Pekain is a place. It's in the Galilee, in northern Israel. He said, what innovation was there in the house of study? They said to him, we are your students, and of your waters do we drink. What they're saying is, no, we want to hear what you have to say. And he says, even so, it is impossible for the house of study to be without something new. Whose week is it? Is imagination and innovation the same thing? I want you to think about your experiences in school. What happened when somebody in your class had a new way of looking at things? Did the teacher support it, not support it? When you think about your staff meetings in your JCC, when somebody comes up with something new, how is it received? Is it expected that you simply follow what has been done? Or that is it expected that you're going to bring a different way of looking at things? And this is coming from guys who lived, they were guys, they were all men, 1,500 years ago, even longer. So what's the relationship between imagination and the world you live in? What's the relationship between imagination and innovation? Let's go to the next slide, please. This is a really important one. Yet I have been to them as a little sanctuary in the countries where they have come. That's a verse from the book of Ezekiel in the Bible. The rabbis use that as a justification. Rabbi Yitzchak said, this refers to the synagogues and study halls in Babylonia. When the temple was destroyed, the rabbis had to imagine a new way of being Jewish, because without the temple, there was nothing for the priests to do. Without the temple, you couldn't bring sacrifices. Without the temple, you couldn't become pure if you were impure. Jewish life was all about using the temple to be Jewish. The temple doesn't exist anymore. The rabbis used their imagination to invent a new form of Judaism, which is what we practice today, Rabbinic Judaism. So they use this quote, and they light on the phrase, Mikdash Me'at, a little sanctuary, and they say, God tells us in the book of Ezekiel that there will be little mini sanctuaries. We won't have the big one anymore, so the synagogue now takes the place of the temple, and prayer takes the place of sacrifice. Huge leap of imagination. And let's finally go to the last one. 13th century mystic, it's a mitzvah, it's a commandment for every wise person to innovate in Torah according to his capacity. That is, this is a leading figure who says, we're not supposed to just repeat what people said before us. We're supposed to figure out new things in every generation and even within the generation. So here are 4 quick texts that give us a grounding in how the ancient rabbis thought about using imagination to make a difference in the world. Here are the 2 questions that I want you to think about. And now we're going to talk about it. I'm not going to send you back to your rooms, but rather just invite everybody to unmute and to jump in. Here are the 2 questions. What does imagination mean to you? And do you have an experience that made an impression on you where you felt like you were in the presence of imagination? Any takers? Somebody be bold. It's a friendly group.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Am I on? Okay, good. I just want to make sure it's working. So your first question was what imagination means to me?
Yeah.
As opposed to like how I would define it?
Either one
I think
is
I would
good.
define it. Okay, well, so I look at imagination as actually a practice skill, and I've spent a lot of my life actually engaged in exercises surrounding creativity and imagination. So it's a bit of a mental muscle that you use to create, light out of nothingness, right? So, sorry, I was about to wax metaphysical. The idea that the so that from our brains and our ability to think and our ability to put together ideas from essentially our own experiences or nowhere, but inside our heads, is actually a bit of a muscle to exercise and to find ways to pull ideas from our brains and then think creatively about how to take those ideas and bring them into reality.
Thank you. So we've used the word imagination, we've used the word innovation, we've now heard the word creativity. Does somebody want to respond or, amplify or have something different than what Clara said?
Hi, I think that I'm Jamie. I think when Clara said, that it's an exercise, that really resonated with me in terms of the exercise that you're letting your thoughts, your ideas, that there's no order, there's no stopping, or there's no limits to it. And that's really when the innovation, or even sort of the reviving of something that may have been done before can really come out, and you can really have a good thought process or conversation if other people are involved around that. And I think that is what's really special. And I think when we see, we look at children and imagination, and we look at that sort of developmentally as we get through and be adults, and sometimes we feel that as adults our imaginations may be more limited. I think it's when we have more stronger sort of barriers, rules, limits that are more deeply ingrained in us, that can make the imagination harder and more of an active exercise. So that's what just came to mind.
Thank you. Somebody want to add? Jump into the conversation, react, respond?
I also think that some of using your imagination is being unique. I don't quite have the thought all together yet, but I think about like in my programs when we're trying to do something different than we've ever done it before. We're asking people to use a little bit of their imagination, think outside the box, be unique, be different. And I'm always encouraging, my staff to challenge the status quo, do something different than the way we've always done it before. And that takes a little bit of imagination.
Okay, thank you. Let me see, since our time for this is up, I want you to continue to reflect on this, and when we're all together, we'll be able to continue to process it. What does imagination mean to you? And when are times that you can, that when you think about it, you can use it as an example. Yeah, it's hard for me to find the words, but here's an example. Here's a story of something that I consider to be really imagination work. I want to go back to, I think, what Clara said, and connect it to what Adam said. Imagination as a practice. Everybody has an imagination. We become socialized, I think, as Jamie told us, we encounter people who make us feel maybe we shouldn't trust our imagination or we shouldn't rely on our imagination. We get socialized to maybe question whether we really are imaginative. Everybody has an imagination, and if you are conscious about applying it regularly, it is a muscle that remains, you remain imaginatively fit. So think about that notion. What do you need? What does it take to help you to continuously work out your imagination so that your imagination is always fit enough for the work that you want it to do? All right? We'll pick that up when we're all together next. I'm done.
Thank you, David. And it really plays right into my next slide and my next conversation. Excuse me. Like how can we dream bigger with the JLTI? We can go right to the next slide if you can. We talked about positive self-talk, maximizing potential already, and leading Jewishly. Obviously, you can all now deliver Divrei Torah. The most important thing I think that David is also talking about is allowing your imagination to flow. Next slide, please. So here's your assignment for next week. And we'll send this to you so you don't have to write anything down next week, next month. You will hear from us about, over the next month, there's several things that we're going to be doing together to prepare for the retreat. And you'll see these concentric circles for a reason. How can we dream bigger for ourselves with imagination, or just in general as advancing leaders? What professional dream do I have for myself, for my department, for my work, for my JCC, and for our movement as a whole? Those are questions I'd like you to answer in an email and send it to me. And I'd like to hold them as a mini time capsule for the next 16 months and see how we do at the end. In addition to that, for the next slide, I'd like you to also consider your own mantra. We talked about Martin Luther King, and Adam Grant even said that Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" came out of an improvisation. And I'd like for you to develop intentionally a 6-word or less mantra. I already know mine. I'm not going to tell you yet. But I'd like you to create that mantra. We will also use that at the retreat. You can send that to me also, please. We will be using it creatively in a game that we play. Finally, I think that Ellen is going to now talk about what to expect in Arizona. And I look forward to seeing you all in person.
Thanks, Beth. So I hope that everybody learned a lot and, really thought about imagination and leadership. And I think everything that David and Beth have led us in today was just really well done. And now I get the pleasure of going through some of the logistic questions that I know all of you have. So I'm just going to go through some things of what you can expect in our upcoming retreat in beautiful sunny Scottsdale, which I can tell you, I keep looking out my window and thinking about how excited I am to be in the desert. So, the days are going to be long. We're going to be starting pretty early and, not going too late, but the days are going to be packed. So make sure that you come energized and ready to work, because we're going to be working hard and it's going to be fun, but it's not going to be easy. People have been asking me about the hotel. So we're staying at the Homewood Suites. I'll send out the actual address for that hotel in the follow-up email that goes out that Beth referred to. So that way, you can take a look at where it is. I'm also going to be emailing you if you are arriving at close to the same time as someone else, or even on the same flight. I'm going to let you know so that you could maybe get together and share a cab to the hotel or wherever you're going. As I previously stated, everyone's going to have a roommate at the retreat. So, we're just sort of pairing those up based on arrivals. But there could be a situation where if you're coming early and you arrive on Sunday, you may have your room to yourself for the night, and then Monday your roommate's going to arrive, because we do have staggered arrivals of everybody. What else? So in terms of what to wear, it's Arizona, so things are pretty casual, but we are expecting you to wear business casual. So what does business casual mean? Business casual means no jeans, no shorts, no athletic attire. We're hoping for, slacks, blouses, shirts, dresses, skirts, whatever, normal business clothing, but you don't need to wear ties. You don't need to wear jackets. I would, suggest you don't, since we're going to be in Arizona. But, it is a casual sort of place. It's not like New York where, the expectations are a little more formal. And, one thing in terms of what to wear and how you're presenting yourself is that, you know, you're part of this cohort and it's prestigious, and we worked hard to find the best and brightest in the movement to be in this cohort, and you're representing not just yourself, but JCC Association and JTS. And so, you know, in terms of how you dress and present yourself, that's part of it too. The weather, you know, I don't know who's already looked. Unfortunately, it's not going to be super hot. It's not going to be like walking around in bikini weather, but it'll be up in the 70s during the day. It does get cooler at night. So, you know, you should bring a jacket or some kind of sweater or something to wear in the evenings. The reimbursement process, I had sent that out previously. I'm going to send it out again in the email that gets sent out after, but really important for you to review it before coming on this retreat. Just some quick things to keep in mind. The cab from your home to the airport is not covered. However, the cab from the airport to the Homewood Suites, the hotel we're staying in, that is covered. When you're getting on your flight, please save your boarding pass if you have a paper one. If you have the app on your phone, make sure to take a screenshot of the boarding pass. Our office is very particular about that, and they request it when you will be sending in that reimbursement invoice. They're going to request, along with the receipt, a copy of the boarding pass. For food, you know, we need an itemized receipt. There's a strict tipping procedure. That is all outlined in that reimbursement policy. So I would say, you know, really read it through carefully so that you know what is and isn't covered, and you're not, disappointed when some of the, you bought chocolate cake and beer and we're not covering that. If you have specific questions regarding anything that I just went through, where the hotel is, transportation, food, what to wear, things like that, you can email me and I'm happy to answer any of those questions. And that's it. I'm going to hand it over to Joy now so she can wrap things up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you to David and Beth for teaching us today and leading us in some really deeper thought questions that we can move on and ponder as we go, because I know that I was taking I think I have 3 pages of notes of what everybody was saying, and each one of those spark another question for me, so that's really cool. I want to just say a couple of words about preparing to be at a seminar, a week-long seminar or 4-day seminar. Remind your execs that you're going. It's really important. They know that they wanted you to be in this program. We've got about a month, so you need to prepare to be away from your JCC. Remind the staff that you supervise that you're going to be going, and pre-think all the things that you do that might not be evident to everybody so that they know how to handle things while you're gone. While you're gone, we will have time for you built into the schedule for brain breaks and time to check emails and things like that. But we're hoping that while everybody's actually in the workshops, that we're focused on the work that we're doing. The other thing that I think is important is when we send out to you the schedule, and you'll see the different topics that we're going to be covering, you can also talk to your exec or your supervisor about it. Prepare them in advance for what you're going to be learning, and then when you get back, have conversations about all the things that you did learn and that we dove into, and how you could or might put some of the thinking into practice right away. We will be sharing that schedule with you in a couple of weeks. And it's certainly about anything. If you have any questions about JCC LTI or logistics or anything like that, feel free to reach out to any one of us. We really appreciate you spending the time together today. Thank you so much for all of those people who called in remotely because they can't get to their JCCs. And thank you all for giving us the time at your J. And I can leave it open for questions if anybody has a question for anybody.
I just want to bring up two things. The first is that during the retreat, every morning, we're going to be having something called a movement session. It's not going to be incredibly intense exercise, but it is going to be moving around and getting you warmed up. So do bring clothing that you would wear for something like that, yoga pants or shorts, whatever. But then you'll change out of that and go into your regular clothes. Aaron Atlas asked if the Facebook group is open yet. The answer is no. We are working on it. I will find out more information when we expect that to be opened up tomorrow when we're back in the office. Let's see. Okay. Those were the only two things that I wanted to bring up.
And thank you to Kimberly for recommending Keith Johnstone's book on improv. So that's a great thing. As we work through JCCLTI, we're going to be mentioning lots and lots of books and hopefully building your professional library and suggesting that you read certain things. And these are just different ways that we can boost the
Wow, we almost made it to the end without a glitch.
Did we lose Joy?
Looks like she got frozen.
I think we lost her.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right.
All right. Well, thank you everyone
Thanks,
so
everybody.
much.
Yep. And look out for that email. It'll be coming your way soon.
See you in Scottsdale.
See you in
All righty.
Scottsdale.
Stay warm.
Thanks, everyone.